Hi there, my name is Becc. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about spiritual responsibility and sacred ethics. This is something that has been on my heart for a while now, as I've been a part of the spiritual community for a long time. I've been on a healing journey, personally, for a long time. So I've had some experience with being on both ends of the sides of the coin, of being someone who's receiving healing and someone who's being a healer. But this has been on my heart for a long time because more and more I've seen some very concerning things happening in the spiritual community, and I just think that it would be helpful to talk about it. It's important to me to talk about it so that we can hopefully do better. So what I'm talking about is I have had way too many clients come to me whose healer became romantically involved with them. I've had way too many clients who have had a healer get triggered and react at them. I've had way too many clients who have had a healer that they were working with consistently just disconnect and just either say, I can't work with you anymore, with no reason, no referral, and just disconnect, or just silence. And these are just a few examples of the concerning things that I'm talking about. And over and over and over again, I see and I understand that there are some key issues that are going on here that as both healers and as clients, we would do well to talk about and to basically know about. So a big part of the problem that I sense, and as always, this is just my perspective, and if you have a perspective, please share in the comments below. And as always, I'm not a trained psychologist or qualified professional in any of those areas, and I don't claim to be. But I do have kind of an understanding of some of these principles through experience and educating myself. What I see as a main issue is healers, not just healers, but psychics, life coaches, people in these positions. Often we don't have a full understanding of the psychology and the mechanics of consciousness that are happening when we're engaged in a connection with a client. In psychological or mental health communities, professionals, they call what I want to talk about, they talk about attachment, and they talk about transference and counter-transference, which is just language to describe the way that emotional dynamics play out in our relationships. These happen in all of our close or consistent relationships and will definitely happen in this type of work. If you're doing any healing work that has to do with emotional processing or just strong emotions, basically emotional work, you can expect that your client is going to get attached to you. You may get attached to the client. Your client will probably do some transference or projection towards you, and you may do the same back. And if you're not aware of this, obviously that's very, in my opinion, that's very not good, because that means that when that happens from a client kind of producing a projection at us or an attachment towards us, some people may not understand it and they react badly, and basically they don't have the underpinning understanding that will create an underpinning set of ethics and what I call boundaries, or client boundaries, for instance, to really caretake that transference or attachment that happens between client and healer. And that's really, really worrisome, because that's definitely something that automatically happens just for us being human and having an emotional system and an attachment and nervous system. These are automatic things that occur. And if we don't know how to handle that, or if we don't get that, when we're in that position as a life coach or a healer or a shaman, anything like that where there's emotions involved, we will be we will be confused or overwhelmed or not caretake, basically not be responsible for what's happening in that dynamic. And this is where clients get injured. People on the receiving end, and again, I don't want to pretend like I'm above anyone. If you're more of a client and you're watching this, I've been a client too. And if you're a healer, you know, we're all learning together, and these are things that I've learned. So if you don't understand attachment and these basic fundamentals of psychology, you're going to have a bad time, and you're not going to be able to do right by your client, because you're not going to be having the capacity, the wisdom, or the education rather, to understand what's going on. And this is the reason that in mental health professionals communities, they learn all about this. A psychologist or a therapist or a counselor will learn all about countertransference, transference, and all of that, and how that works, because it's such a significant part of the relationship. It's also such a significant part of the healing that can happen, and it can be a beautiful doorway for healing. And we're supposed to use it as a beautiful doorway. We're not supposed to take advantage of a client who has had romantic or sexual feelings to us and date them. That's really wrong and not okay. We're not supposed to become parental towards a client who may have that projection on you as a motherly figure or whatever, because they are receiving from you the unmet needs that have been stirring for years, the unmet needs of nurturing or being held or whatever you're providing that they have always needed. It's normal for people to experience that, for your client to experience that, and we don't get to react badly towards that and or judge that or say like, what the heck, you know, that's not okay, or shame clients or disconnect from clients because we don't like it, because you only don't like it because you don't understand it. And this is just, it's really bad what I've heard about people just disconnecting. Even in medical professions, who obviously, and I'm saying this for people who may not do a lot of deep emotional processing, such as someone if you're a psychic reader, for example. But even someone in a medical professional position, they have some education about patient attachment in their studies, usually. And they have rules and codes of ethics, just like the psychologists, that they abide by to protect the client, protect the patient. The reason that even the medical professionals, who are obviously just sort of doing physical things, have that education and those boundaries anyway, even if it's not so obvious why, the reason is that they understand that there's an emotional underpinning and emotions are being involved when someone has an illness and they need care. If in the act of receiving care, we will be stimulated emotionally, especially if you've been starved of that, for example, because of, you know, childhood wounding or something like that, or just loneliness, you know. So they understand that there's an emotional flow that's happening behind the scenes, and they caretake it. They're not allowed to date patients because that would be abusing their position. They're not allowed to work on family members because then they usually won't be able to be objective, and they may make decisions out of unconscious or conscious subjectivity, which influences their ability to truly heal. And so even if you're just a psychic reader or something, you have to understand that the person is asking you the question because of painful emotions that are running behind the question. You know, so many questions that I got as a psychic reader, all about you know, based in feeling worthless or feeling disempowered or needing to trust or needing to line up to having their needs met. So there are emotions involved in that. And so clients can become dependent on you, like overly dependent on you. They can become attached to you or the information that you bring through in a way that is actually disempowering for them. So we want to really understand what's happening in our relationship with clients, and for clients with the relationship with the healer. It's normal and actually very natural for you to have sort of strong feelings towards someone that you might work with consistently, even if that's like a doctor, as I said. This is normal. When we have these instances with clients, we need to remember what's really, really going on. We have to understand, okay, this projection is happening here. And if we don't understand, we need to resource a way for us to figure it out. If that means you need to do some reading about psychology and attachment and things like that, you need to do that. We have a sacred responsibility to clients. We have a sacred responsibility to be in the position that we are in. It's such a joy and a gift and a beautiful thing for us to share our medicine, and that's the benefit of that space. But we have to also understand that in that dynamic, when the healer, they automatically have or are in a higher position of authority. And this is because the client is the one that's being vulnerable. They're coming to you with their needs and their questions and their confusion, waiting for clarity and all of those things. They're being vulnerable, and you don't have to be vulnerable. And they're kind of handing that to you. And for us to start kind of taking advantage of that, as I said, by dating a client or even just befriending a client, you know, this isn't usually okay either. This is in psychological communities, they would call that being in dual roles. And we have a responsibility to maintain these specific and clear boundaries of what role we're in and what role the client is in to avoid creating confused boundaries, which is so often exactly what has caused the very issues that we're trying to heal. When someone has a consistent and always supportive, a consistent relationship with a therapist or a healer, and the roles are clear and there's no confusion about whose role is what and what that looks like, that is when our attachment systems begin to heal. That is the roots to create a secure attachment. Anything other than that is going to be possibly creating reinstilling the insecure attachment wounds that have been here. And you know, a good example is like if the therapist starts to become a bit more parental, or they start to show special treatment, if the healer starts to show special treatment rather to the client is going to enhance kind of if they have a projection of feeling like mothered by the therapist. The problem is that the therapist, whilst they may do these little special things that they think is cool, if they get uncomfortable or they don't want to be in full mother role, they're going to just be dramatically withdraw and be like, what are you doing with the client? That's what I've seen with people, and then the client is obviously left feeling confused and unsure of where they stand, and it's probably exactly the same imprint that they had with their mother. So we have to have basically the solution for this is, and also the solution for, none of this is to say that we can't make mistakes, you know, that therapists, healers, all sorts of people, doctors, we make mistakes, and that's being human. What makes it different in those communities is that they have a sacred kind of code of ethics and boundaries that they have to abide by that protect the client when those mistakes are made. They also, you know, so the therapist medicine is that when trouble comes up or conflict comes up, they use it as a doorway to create more healing, and they remain consistent, and they always go towards repair. They're not going to abandon or blame or shame or anything like that the client and their inner child might be used to experiencing. And that is what creates healing. It gives them the missing experience of there can be ups and downs in relationships and we're okay still. That's a secure attachment. But if we don't know how to do that, so if we don't have those sacred ethics or responsibility and boundaries, when that happens, we might just wildly join in the conflict with that client in an unhealthy way. We might mesh our roles and be like, it's fine for me to befriend or date this client. We might take on clients where we can't be objective. We might not be able to notice where we're not being objective. So we have to say, okay, I'm going to protect my clients by running my practice with a sacred code of ethics and clear roles between us. So that includes boundaries, that includes a right to basic safety, that includes not taking advantage of the position of authority that you're in. That includes watching for your own projections on the client, your own feelings that are brought up by the relationship, and caretaking what's about you and knowing it's rarely about what the client's actually doing. Of course, there are rare instances where, if a client becomes violent or damaging in some way, we have the right to protect ourselves. But even in that instance, there's a way to caretake that where you take care of everybody anyway, knowing that that person is just acting out their pain. So we end client relationships with referrals if we have to refer out. We don't just leave people flying by themselves. As a psychic, if we see someone and we sense that they're in like constant confusion and they're just using the psychic readings as a way to avoid that or escape that, we try to talk about it or make a suggestion for them, or even cut them off from readings if you have to. You have to look at what you're bringing to the relationship. There's all different things that you can do and you can decide what's right for you in your sacred practice, but there's some very basic things that apply to the concepts of attachment and boundaries and general safety, such as privacy, confidentiality, all these different things that are really, really important and are pretty basic that you can start to practice now. And I think behind it all, we want to remember the why. Why am I doing this work? Because of that love that you have, that golden compassion or wisdom that you just have to share or whatever. And remembering over and over to check your ego, check that you're just coming from a place of service, that you're not trying to dominate, that you're not trying to just use people to get rich. In these positions, we have to, all I'm saying is we have to keep checking our ego, okay? Because it's such a sacred, beautiful thing that we're doing. It's such a golden, beautiful gift. We have to be in constant communion with ourselves and developing ourselves and healing anything that comes up for us so we don't act out in the relationship. So these are just some things that I've put together. I'm writing an article on this now that has more very clear things that I know that I use that you may like to use or sort of shift and change for yourself. But thank you for listening, and let's remember our sacred golden responsibility and joy of being together in this healing world that we're all in together.